Welcome to Making Gains in association with the University of Derby and Finnebrogue's Naked Bacon, the biggest revolution to happen to British breakfast in a generation. I am so excited to say that our guest for today's podcast is none other than a man who is 1/3 of the longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions of all time, the reigning, as I come to you, IC Champion, and pound for pound one of the strongest superstars on the WWE roster. Biggie, welcome to Making Gains, sir.
I appreciate it. Oh, that's beautiful. That's lovely. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. I said one of the pound for pound strongest men on the roster. Could we talk about your powerlifting numbers? Because they are pretty impressive.
We can. I'm trying to think of all my PRs. It's been a minute. My best deadlift is 806 pounds. This is all raw and drug tested, by the way. My best squat is 750, and my best bench press, just touch and go, is 575 pounds.
So your bench wasn't in competition. That was kind of in the gym.
So that's my gym. Man, I can't. My best competition bench, I want to say was like 525. Was it better than that?
I've got it 529. Was the research I'd done?
Yeah, 529. There you go. Yeah. You know better than I do.
And in terms of powerlifting, that came after your kind of foray into football at college. But what do you think you were most made for when it comes to exercise?
I would say powerlifting. Probably. I think being, I'm about 5'11", being a bit shorter has its benefits, especially with bench. We know having shorter limbs and having a big barrel chest is obviously a good thing. A lot of the taller guys, there's some taller guys who have great squats, but it's a little bit harder to squat well. But just kind of my stature, I have a lot of fast twitch fiber. Like I have to work hard to be in good conditioning and be in good shape because it's mostly fast twitch explosiveness. So just doing something for one rep quickly is what I feel I was built for. So I didn't powerlift for that long, but I was able to have some nice success. And I think a lot of that's because I have natural gifts physically. And
are you somebody who kind of looks at a weight and just puts on muscle tissue, or how does your body react?
Yes, that's exactly how I am. When people are like, man, I can't gain weight. Like, I don't understand that. That's not me at all. I am someone, I have to be vigilant about keeping my weight down because I can easily be 320 pounds in a blink of an eye. So I've always been the type I just started lifting real young, and I noticed when I started lifting for real, like in a real program, and taught how to actually like build a workout and periodization, I was 12 years old, and I was in the gym 5 to 6 days a week. I loved it. And I was so thankful that I learned the proper way. And I learned how to squat to depth. I learned how to do everything the right way. And I just noticed probably took a couple weeks for me to notice a change in my body. And as soon as that happened, I was hooked. As soon as I saw that little lump of muscle starting to grow, I said, this is it. This is my thing. And like the gym was always a place of solace for me. When I was stressed or sad or whatever it was, I could just kind of turn everything off. I can go to the gym, and it's almost meditative for me. Just be able to be in touch with your body, to work on your body. The amount of focus it takes to bench press 575 pounds or to squat heavy, you just have to kind of shut everything else off. And that's something I always loved about weightlifting, is it allowed me that release. So I gravitated to it very quickly as soon as I started.
So if you're going for one rep max, kind of where do you take your head at that point? Some people go crazy. Some people almost go the opposite. They go very calm. Where do you go?
For me, it's kind of, there's a calm, and then there's the explosion of adrenaline. But I just try to think of, especially on my deadlift, I try to think of my setup, because your positioning is really important, especially when you're going real heavy. I try to think of my stance, my positioning, everything, where I need everything to be, and just kind of focusing that energy. And a lot of times, and that's why I started using it in wrestling, is the bowl of chalk. And that's just something I loved with powerlifting, is it gives you that moment. And there's that moment of calm where you're in front of that bowl of chalk, you're chalking up, you're getting ready, you're thinking about your positioning. And then as soon as you finish chalking up your hands, you move to the bar, and that's where that burst of adrenaline, that's where that's where it really hits, and that's where you're about to go crazy. So that's what it is for me, is you just take a second to kind of calm yourself and then get ready to have that physical burst.
And how do you split your sessions up? You mentioned 6 days a week at 12 years old, which is unreal, by the way.
Yeah, it's I definitely learned to back down as I learned more about training. And man, I've been training for over 20 years. Now I learned the importance of rest. So for me, I'm lifting 4 days a week. I'm doing 2 days of cardio and one like true rest day. I've also not I backed off a lot of the powerlifting. So there's still elements of that. I still squat, bench, and deadlift, but I'm not really hitting a lot of 1 rep maxes. You know, I'm almost 35 now. It's I've had my fair share of wear and tear. 4 knee surgeries, tore my left pec too. So I said, you know what? I put my body through enough. I still love training, but I don't feel the same need to like put 700 pounds on my back again.
But you kind of say that 2 of your knee surgeries came during college, and you then still went into powerlifting straight after that.
Yeah, well, actually 3. I tore both my ACLs in college, and I broke my right patella in college, all in like a 2.5-year span. And, I think about it. And when all those injuries happened, I thought, you know what? This is enough. I need to take care of my body. I put it through enough. But there was also that lingering part of me that just wanted to do more athletically. Like I felt like I had more to give. That itch wasn't gone. I still had that itch. And I used to have this dream, man, this recurring dream. And it was almost a nightmare of, when I was done playing football, I would have these dreams that I was at practice. And it would just felt like this was a part of my life I didn't fulfill. And I felt a void. And I'm so thankful I found wrestling, or wrestling found me, because I just kind of lucked into it, because it immediately filled that void. As soon as I started wrestling, like that itch, that need was gone. Like this was now what I felt I was meant to be doing. And yeah, man, it was just, that was my first dream though. Football from a young age, especially growing up in the States, in Florida, it's massive. Right. Football was king there. So it was the first thing that I started playing. I started playing tackle football at age 7, and I just loved it. And that was what I thought was going to be my career in my life. And, life has a way of saying, nah, right. your best laid plans not going that way. But I realize now, when there's so many times where I'm at work, I'm in an arena, I'm wrestling, and I think this is where I'm supposed to be. Okay. I have a true feeling like this is what I'm meant to be doing right now in my life. So I felt like I found my home. Condoleezza
Rice was asked, how do you define yourself? And she said, I'm a failed violinist. And that's because that's what she wanted to do. And then life took place, and then she becomes what she becomes. And I think, I was trying to do skeleton bobsleigh at one stage. I wanted to go to the Winter Olympics. It didn't happen. And as a result of that, I found presenting. And I love it. I get a euphoria, but I still have that. Funnily enough, you talk about that itch. I still have that itch because I'm just young enough to go, oh, could I?
Right.
Which means when I go to the gym, I still attack things the same way I would have done, but I don't have those goals, if that kind of makes sense.
No, completely. I definitely get that, man. And it's, it's funny. It's you really think that that's where your life is supposed to be headed, and you spend so much mental effort. Like I only played high school football for 1 year.
Right.
And my senior year. And typically your junior year is the year you get recruited. And it was very difficult, to only play 1 year of high school football and get an offer to a big D1 school. It very, very rarely happens. But my whole life from, maybe when I was like 5 up until I stopped playing at 21, even when I wasn't playing football in high school, it was always, I started amateur wrestling, and I was a state champion in amateur wrestling. And that was only because I wanted to do something that would fill the void of football. Because I went to a school that didn't offer football beforehand. And then I transferred my senior year to one that did. So it was always trying to get back to football. I was wrestling because it was the next most physical thing, and it would maybe give me the tools to get back to football. So even when I wasn't doing it, it was always to get back to that, because that was the one thing that felt right, that I knew I wanted to do. My whole life was directed to that, and then it was over. And I think that's one thing that people don't talk about enough too, is a lot of athletes really struggle mentally and struggle with depression and with their mental health, because when you devote yourself to a craft, especially athletics, your training, your eating, your rest, your study, so much of what you do is geared towards that. I remember, my schedule in college is, you're like, a lot of times you're waking up at 5:30, you're going straight to your lift, You're doing rehab. I was in rehab a lot because of all the injuries. You go to class, you come back to go to practice, to just so much of my life is centered around this. And then just like that, snap of fingers, it's gone. And this connection you have with your teammates, with the people you train with, it's gone. And you might still be friends with them, but you don't put in the same time and effort into this craft. And it's so jarring, I think, to have something that you really love, that's such a massive part of your life that you devote so much time to, and then it's just gone. There's no transition. There's no, like, you don't slowly get eased out of that into like a normal life or a 9-to-5 or whatever it is that you pursue. So it's I really thought I kind of suffered alone, and then I started talking to others as I got older, and I realized so many of us kind of had the same feelings.
But I think that even happens regardless of whether you make it or you don't. So if you made NFL, you then hit probably around the age you are now, and then they start saying you've maybe got 1 year on your contract left. And it might not even be as kind as that. It might just be, bam, injury, you're gone. And then it's, I don't even have the adulation anymore. And who are you when you leave that sport? And I remember Dave Chappelle, I think it was, who said, it was advice from his father. And he basically said, make sure that when you leave this, whatever this is, that you know enough about yourself at the beginning so that in essence you don't lose yourself, which is why then he walks away before the third series of the Chappelle Show, because he just says, I'm going to lose myself. This isn't what I signed up to. And even though he gets offered, I think, 50 million for that series, he walks away because the cost was going to be too much. And I think that happens almost no matter how high you get on that pyramid, that departure, that's brutal.
Oh, for sure, man. And I actually realized that when last year I talked to a buddy of mine who I played with at Iowa, and he played 5 or 6 years in the league. And he told me he too had the same thing. And I thought, man, you know, and a lot of times NFL careers, like, you go in not thinking you're to play 15 years. You just know it's that kind of sport. So I thought he made it. He made some good money. He got to that level, and that he would have felt fulfilled, but it doesn't work that way. And I love that Chappelle line too, because I think you have to be more than just your job. And I know you can love what you do. You can love your craft, but when that's gone, you have to make sure that you still feel whole as a person, that you still feel that you have a sense of individual identity that's not tied to a job where someone can release you or fire you or cut you just like that on a whim. And it's a fine line of really still giving your passion your all, but also knowing that you would be okay if things came to an end.
Am I right in thinking that the way you actually got to Iowa was the Iowa coach saw you in the gym benching?
Yes. Yeah. It's my story of getting to Iowa and also getting to WWE it almost feels like happenstance. I just stumbled into things. So the only reason he was there to recruit guys, his name is Phil Parker. He was the defensive backs coach at Iowa, and he recruited Florida. And he was there to recruit guys who were a year younger than me. And I was just there working out. And I just think, man, so to backtrack a little bit. So the coach's office, he was going to talk to my coach. The coach's office is connected to the weight room. So you have to walk through the weight room to get to the coach's office. And that's the only reason. So I think, man, what if I'd stepped out then? What if I was sick that day? What if I was in the bathroom? What if I was even just outside running or doing something else as opposed to being there? Because he didn't know who I was. He wasn't looking for me. But he just happened to see me benching 315 pounds for I think 10 to 12 reps.
Wow.
And, you know, at 17 years old, I guess that was fairly impressive. So that's what got me the offer to Iowa and nothing else. And I just think, man, what if I hadn't been in that position at that time? And I don't know if you want to call it God or the universe or whatever energy it is, but I felt like even though things at Iowa didn't work out for me, I didn't have the career I wanted there. I didn't go on to play in the NFL, but being at Iowa was also what got me to WWE, because I had a similar thing where I was done at Iowa. I was done playing football, but I was still going to school there. So I finished up, I got my degree. I started going to grad school there. I was working as a teaching assistant and going to grad school. And I just happened to still be working out at the weight room.
Just to be clear, so you're a teaching assistant in a school the size that you are.
Yes, when I think about it now, I was like, who let me grade college students' papers? Why did you ever think that was a good idea? But yes, that's what I did, and I felt like I was solid at my job, and I felt like I was in a good position, but I just didn't think that this was going to be my next 40 years is, because my plan was, hey, let me finish my master's, spend 5 to 6 years working on a PhD, and I'd either teach or be a part of a university as an athletic director, helping students and student athletes. And that was kind of the plan. But in the same vein, I just kept feeling like, I don't know if sitting behind a desk or teaching is for me the next 40 to 45 years. And that just kind of like weighed on me, is this, hey, you're in your early 20s. What are you going to do the rest of your life? That question just loomed so heavy on me for so long. But again, I just stumbled into the opportunity with WWE. It was me being in the weight room at the time. I'm still working out there, even though I wasn't a part of the team. And one of the guys that I played ball with was with the Steelers for a little bit, but he got hurt, Mike Humple. And he just knew a guy, Mike Doherty, who bumped into Jim Ross randomly on a plane. Just randomly, they had the same flight, and Mike was wearing an Iowa shirt, and he started talking to JR. I think they had another flight, and they were on that same flight too. So they kept talking, and they made a connection and said, hey, are there any guys at Iowa who might be interested when they're done with their wrestling career, getting into pro wrestling? And because Mike Doherty was friends with Mike Humple, and because, and I think too, like, imagine if Mike hadn't worn that Iowa shirt that one day. Yeah. Imagine if JR booked another flight. I wouldn't have this career I have now, because if you asked me to list 200 jobs, I never would have put pro wrestler on it. It's for some reason at 23, it just didn't occur to me that this is a job you could possibly do. It just never crossed my mind. I was a fan as a kid, but I just feel so fortunate and so blessed. And it's clear to me that there was some kind of plan. There was some energy. And like I said, whether it's God or karma or the universe, I'm not entirely sure anymore. But I feel like it was all meant to happen. It was all meant to lead me to where I'm at now.
We've definitely got to talk about WWE, but I'm just curious to know, how big were you at your absolute biggest?
Oh man, at my heaviest, when I was really powerlifting heavy and kind of not even eating whatever I wanted to, like force feeding myself to get big, I was 317 pounds.
Competing at 275?
No, competing at 370. Well, I didn't know. I competed at 275 for my first meet, and then I competed at 295 for nationals, and then after that, I just let the weight creep up, and I got to about 317. But yeah, my heaviest competing was 295.
And how did you structure your sessions back then?
So Rob, I was really blessed because we were working out at John Cena's gym close to where I live now. But Rob McIntyre used to train all of us in FCW. And FCW was the training ground for WWE at the time. And he would kind of structure things. So I was actually, when I was at my strongest, I was only lifting 3 days a week.
Okay.
So yeah, but they were all centered around. So one day would be centered around, it might be like a shoulder and upper body day, but we'd also start with like deadlift, and we'd have like a deadlift regimen. So the nice thing is I could kind of, it's very hands off for me because I just trusted him. Yep. He knew me. He knew my body. So yeah, it was only 3 days a week. And I'm always of the mindset that more is better. I have that programmed in me, but I realize sometimes backing off a little bit can be beneficial. So at that time, it was only 3 days a week.
And in terms of volume, what did it look like in each session?
Man, it always changed from time to time. It's been so long, man. Honestly, the last meet I did was 2011, I think.
Okay.
So it's been a while, so I have to remember. But typically, it was probably around like 5 sets of bench or so. I might do on the day. We do some auxiliary stuff as well. But for the most part, I'm only doing a total of anywhere from like 25 to 32 sets. Leg days are not as volume heavy because everything's centered around squat. And honestly, I feel like with 4 sets of squat, I'm pretty much I'll do some low back stuff, I'll do some hamstring stuff, and then you're pretty good. Once you're really pushing it, once you're like doing sets with 695, with 725, once you're that heavy, I didn't need a whole lot else after that on leg days. And
when you say you were like pushing the food, was that actually, did you structure it? Did you kind of track it? Or was it just a case of the more I can eat, the better?
Yeah, it was structured for the most part. So I was trying to do 7 meals a day. And a lot of that, a couple of those might be protein shakes, okay, and the rest will try to be whole foods. But my problem is I can put weight on easily, but to really put weight on, I needed to kind of not eat the cleanest. So at one point I'd have like a DiGiorno's pizza every single day. And it was just, I get to the point where I was uncomfortable. I was just almost in pain eating, just stuffing myself, but it allowed me to get a lot stronger. And I had a good squat gut. I don't know for anyone who's ever got there's something to it. I don't know the science behind it, but when you have that good belly and it pushes out against the belt, man, it allows you, we call it coming out of the hole. So when you're squatting and you get to depth, being able to squat when you have something to push out against really helps.
You mentioned FCW, so that's how you fire into WWE. It's now NXT, but you were in the original FCW with guys like Brock Lesnar, so many, Seth Rollins, household names that you kind of, I guess, started with. What was that like when you walk through those doors for the very first time?
FCW at the time was weird, hodgepodge, I suppose, because so when I got to FCW before Seth Rollins, and this was like 2009, a little bit before. I think when I was there, I'm trying to think of who would I don't know if there are any current names. No, Cena was like long. Cena had already been on the road making his money at the time. Man, there were guys like Michael Tarver was there, who's with Nexus for a bit. But like, I think Seth came a little bit later. Roman Reigns came a little bit later. Dean, a lot of the bigger names came a little bit after me. But yeah, at the time, man, it was pretty different from the NXT we know now. FCW kind of felt like we were all signed to WWE contracts, but we felt like an island kind of on our own. You know, it's this little warehouse in Tampa. We had at the time 2 or 3 rings, and we don't have NXT now is on national TV. No one, like our TVs at the time when we were in FCW were on some small local station in Florida. Like NXT might have, 800,000 viewers. We might have had 80 viewers, that's the difference in the kind of the scope of what our product was at the time. But, it's just a moment of time where, we weren't making a ton of money. You're under WWE contracts, but I was making $500 a week, just enough to pay my bills and to go train. But it also felt like I'm on my way. I'm pursuing something that I want to do. And I think too often, I try to tell people who are pursuing a craft or a dream or whatever it is, that we're oftentimes too I don't want to say goal oriented, but we think too often of the end. It's always like, I can't wait to get out of here and achieve my dream. But enjoying that journey, enjoying the process of getting to know your craft, of getting better, of learning, of making those steps on a week-to-week basis, I think is really beautiful too. So I try to tell people try to be as present as you can, to be in the moment. Of course, your goal is to get to the main roster or to become a pro athlete or whatever it is, but also enjoy the grind, enjoy the friendships you make along the way. Don't just think that the only thing that matters is getting to your goal. It's enjoy the journey there.
And I guess that's really relevant to yourself, because what if that goal gets taken from you? Then you haven't enjoyed anything. That's then totally futile. Whereas if you've enjoyed the process, you might have grown personally and learned from it.
Exactly, man. And that's the thing too. And I hope that everyone gets to achieve their dream or whatever it is. But, like you said, a lot of times it gets cut short. And I think I was definitely guilty of that. I look back at my time at Iowa and I'm very thankful for it. But I don't know if I enjoyed it as much as I should have and could have. And it's college, there's so many new experiences and people you meet. And I was just so focused on like making it to the NFL. That was my goal. And that was the one thing that mattered. And I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. So, I try to tell people to enjoy that, because not everyone can make it. But I think there's a beauty in pursuing something you love, even if it's not making it. There's something really, there's a Jim Carrey quote, I think at a commencement speech where he talks about his father, and he talks about the fact that his dad was really funny, that he probably could have been a great stand-up comedian, but he took the safe route and he took the safe job, and his plan B released him. They fired him. They cut him. So he learned from that moment that you shouldn't take the plan B. Don't take the safe route. Go after what you love, what you want to do, what your dream is, what you feel like your purpose on this earth is, because there's no guarantees even in that safety net. There really is, there's not. You don't know. You never know. So that to me I was already in what I wanted to do and I felt like I was meant to do, but it just kind of reaffirmed that to me, just hearing that again. Because waking up with purpose, waking up with a passion, with a real desire to do something is beautiful. And, there's always financial concerns and I get you got to worry about paying the bills, but do what you love. Honestly, if you do what you love and you have a passion for it, you'll find a way to pay your bills, to make money from it, man. You really will.
Amen to that. And so NFL doesn't happen for you dream-wise, but getting the call up to the WWE main roster does happen for you. How do you feel when you finally get that phone call?
It's in many ways it felt like a long time coming. I felt like I was ready for it, but I was excited, man, because it was such an incredible opportunity. It's not even just, hey, you're getting called up to the main roster, which is incredible in and of itself, but it's when I find out it's, hey, you're coming out with Dolph Ziggler, who was red hot at the time, with AJ Lee, who's red hot at the time, and you're going to lay out John Cena to close the show in Philadelphia, the night of the Slammies, and we're going to close the show with you standing over John Cena. That's pretty cool,
That's
man.
Cool.
That's pretty dope. That's dope.
Looking enormous.
Yeah, well, I tried. I tried. So yeah, I was. That was a big moment, and to think that it was 8 years ago, man. This job really it flies by, man. It all flies by. But that was massive for me. That was massive because it felt like all the time I'd spent, the 3.5 years or so in FCW in developmental, it was all worth it. The grind was all worth it. The sacrifice, the leap. When I got signed to WWE, I didn't know what I was doing. I had zero pro wrestling experience. I thought, you know what? There's a good chance that I do this and they fire me in 2 to 3 months. I don't know, but
really,
I bet on myself. It was just a blind leap of faith. I don't know if I can be good at this. I don't know if I can be a star in this industry, but let me try. And worst case scenario is, man, I kind of, pick myself up. I go back to Iowa. I finish my master's and then we reassess. But I'm just so glad that because of the time, I don't naturally have this risk-taking mentality of trying things. I'm not the most self-confident person you'll ever meet. Like I had to kind of just say, hey, just shut off that part of your brain that second guesses and that doubts and just do it. Just jump into it and just see. Just bet on yourself. Just give yourself a chance. And I'm so glad I learned that lesson and that I took that gamble because it paid off. And like I said, I really, truly feel this is where I'm meant to be in my life right now.
I think if you were in the industry for another 10 years as a superstar, I think people regardless will definitely look very fondly back at your time as part of the New Day, and rightfully so. I mentioned 1/3 of the longest reigning tag team champions in WWE history, but significantly, it's Black History Month. In terms of, you've got 3 black men with titles around their waist. Every venue you're going into, whether it's the Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, Dirty South, wherever it is, you are 3 black men representing a company like WWE. How aware of you are that when you're doing it? Can you kind of feel that sense of pride and responsibility? Oh,
very much so, man. And we try to entertain everyone, of course, too. Yeah. But there's also certain pride when you look out at an audience and you see Black kids smiling and laughing, because representation in media really matters. When you can watch television shows and movies and watch the news and see people that look like you excelling, right, I think truly means something. And I am appreciative too of, I think of guys like Ron Simmons that I grew up watching as a kid too. And also one of the things that I loved is that I think so often in media is you have these tropes of what a Black man is or is supposed to be. And the fact that we got to come out wearing pink and blue and we had unicorn horns on our heads. And, I realized, there's so many of us Black men who feel this pressure to fit into certain boxes and to carry ourselves a certain way. But I've met so many, my buddy Mike Daniels has been in the league for almost a decade at this point. And he's a massive dude, over 300 pounds. And he's a huge nerd. He's a massive nerd. And he loves anime. But in the same vein, he's an incredible football player that you can be more than what people conceive of you. When they look at you, the box they want to put you in. And that's one of the things that I'm proud of too, as Black men, that we didn't have to force ourselves into a certain preconceived notion of what we should be because we look a certain way, that we got to be goofy, that we got to be weird. We got to express ourselves in a way that felt authentic to us. And that's something that I'm really proud of. And I hope that others take away as well, that as Black men and women, we can pursue whatever it is that we want, that we don't have to feel forced into a certain lane because this is the expectation of us. That, you know, the Black experience I love is because it's so diverse and it's so different and it's so robust. And there is no singular Black experience. There just isn't. We all grew up in so many different ways. And we just kind of wanted to be a part of that rainbow, showing people that this is one flavor. This is one way to express yourself. And that's what I'm really proud of too.
One way of expressing yourself would definitely be in the form of a beast, as you mentioned. And someone who does that is a man who lives in the Valley of the Beast, CT Fletcher. How was it like going to that gym, man?
Oh, it was incredible. So we were in LA, and I think we were in LA we had a show there, a house show in LA. And I forgot who had the connection. It was I was there with Jinder and Braun. And I think someone was like, hey, you want to stop by CT Fletcher's gym? And, you know, so many of us had seen his stuff on Instagram. And he's so inspirational, the way he attacks things. And I watched a documentary on him, and I realized, man, we have so many similarities, the way we were raised. Like, he had a very strict religious father. And there was a certain connection that I felt with him. So I was like, you know what? This might be a once in a lifetime opportunity. So we decided to stop in, got to talk to him. And we were so glad he was actually there, and he put us through the paces, man. And, you know, like you said, I'm used to doing powerlifting. For me, it's one heavy single rep, maybe 2 or 3, and then you rest for a couple minutes. But CT put us through it, man. It's just a ton of drop sets. We might have done like 800 total reps that day. It was something. I don't even remember the number, but it was a lot of just rest pause. It was a lot like a bodybuilder workout where it was just, you know, filling the muscles with blood, just set after set after set. Man, he killed us with the reps, but it was such a cool experience. When I was done, I felt like my arms were completely useless, just dead completely. But being able to train with someone like that who has that mentality, and I love that, and the mentality that he puts out there is just that it's still your set. Like, keep going, keep pushing. Sometimes we think our limitations are at a certain point, and we don't know until we just push through it that we can go further, that we have more left in the tank, that we have more of us to give. And I think he's someone that inspires a lot of people. And so to be able to meet him that day, to train with him and talk with him a little bit was pretty cool.
He's a flipping legend, that guy, I have to say. But in terms of your legends, if I ask most people, or a lot of people, especially inside the industry, who you think the greatest of all time is, people talk about Ric Flair. In my case, I talk about The Undertaker. But for you, it's an unusual answer.
Oh, well, this is my favorite. He's my favorite wrestler. So I'm not going to say, like, put him wherever you want. I'll say he's my favorite because he captivated me as a kid. And that's the man, the myth, the legend, Goldberg. I say Goldberg because I think for me, he just hit at the right time. In the late 90s, I was born in 86. So I was probably around 11 or 12 when he first kind of came on the scene. And he just captivated an audience like no other. And it's just his intensity. I love the walk, the security guards, and the security guards weren't to protect Goldberg. They were to protect the people from Goldberg, just to let you know. Don't come around here trying to mess around with Goldberg because he might take your head off. So he just had an intensity and a connection. Like, man, if you go back and watch those old matches, the way people lose their minds for him, the way they explode on those jackhammers and on the spears is a thing of beauty. And the fact that he's still doing it, he's still around, I think is pretty cool. One of the things that I remember too is I met him at a signing. There was an in-store signing. This had to be in the late 90s. And I remember being in a suit with my dad, who was also in a suit. And I think we were either coming from church or going to church. And we stood in line for a bit, a long line, because he was a huge star at the time. And we finally get to the front of the line, and we get to meet Goldberg. And this is my first time really going to any kind of signing or anything. And I remember the smile on his face. I remember him complimenting me on my suit. I remember just this interaction, which probably lasted no more than 30 seconds. I remember just how pleasant it was. And that's something that I always take with me too, especially with kids too, at the shows, at meet and greets, that sometimes you can be tired. I'm sure he had a flight, and I'm sure he had, he was probably on the road for the last 20 days, whatever it was, but he took that time to be kind, to be polite, to be giving. And that's a memory from over 20 years ago that I still take with me today, something I always treasure. And that's why, like for me, that's why I always say Goldberg, because I have that personal connection with him, not only as a fan and seeing him on TV, but for that very brief moment, he gave me a memory that I'll always treasure. I'll be 60, 70 years old, and I'll still remember the time that Goldberg was such a delight, and I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that one with us. I have to say, when you talk about his entrance, so I'm privileged enough to have said I've worked for NXT UK, so some of the guys on camera I'll recognize. I'll say, oh, hey, there's Dustin. Oh, that's cool. When he returned to Raw, there was somebody in the background marking out harder than anybody else. You.
Yeah. No, it was just cool to, at the time, we're on the show. We're a part of the show. And there's a part of you, too, that wants to feel like a superstar and like people are there to see you, too. But it's also very full circle for me to be a part of a Goldberg walk, just to be in the background as you walk by. And for me to just kind of lose my mind and start flailing about felt right. So it's just very full circle. I never would have imagined when I was a kid watching him on TV doing his thing that I would ever be a part of anything Goldberg ever did on TV. But it was really cool to just, to be a fan and to think back to how he made me feel when I was a fan, and to be a part of that was pretty cool.
I have to say, your energy is really kind of mellow and reflective and just, I guess, someone who's really comfortable with themselves. Has that been partly as a product of lockdown? Because I know that I feel like I've grown in a number of ways during lockdown. Has that applied to yourself?
Yes, man, completely. So I tend to be an overthinker just by nature, but I got to a certain point once the pandemic hit, and I realized I had all this free time. I think with WWE, we're on the road so often, and it's always just go, 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 and it can be hard to be reflective, especially when, man, a lot of times you sleep 2 hours and you have a flight to catch, and then you're on to the next town. You got to wake up and work out. But I just had all this time, and I thought, man, what do I want to do with this time? And I don't want to sit here. I don't want to spiral. I don't want my mental health to decline. So I said, you know what? I had a friend of mine, Kat Simpson, who kind of introduced me to Headspace and to guided meditation. And I was kind of off and on. I liked it, but I hadn't really been consistent with it. And I used being on the road as an excuse. So I thought, you know what, if I'm not going to take this time now when I have all this time to really commit myself to meditation, then like that's on me. I got to do it. So I decided to spend every single day meditating, and awesome. I would spend, 10 to 15 minutes just every day, nothing too big. I would go on walks, and I just spent more time working on myself. And like, I think, especially with the passing of Brody, Luke Harper, John Huber, someone who was a dear friend of mine, someone I love very much. I think that we don't know when this life comes to an end. We don't know when our time here is over. And I just reflected more on who I wanted to be, on how I wanted to impact this world, the people around me. And sometimes it's easy to feel overwhelmed by what goes on around you, that you're helpless, but we're not. And I think I just I thought more about being the change that I wanted to see.
Wow.
Not just leaving it up to politicians or to people around me. And maybe I can't drastically change the world. Maybe maybe I'll never be a household name, but that's not ever the goal. But if I can make even just a dent into some of the problems that I see around me, or bettering some of the lives around me. Because I thought too, of all the people that gave me a helping hand, all the people, even people I may have never met or never knew who helped me out. And I'd love to be a blessing to others. And so I just thought more about who I wanted to be as a man. What kind of, I guess I don't worry too much about legacy per se, but I wanted to make sure that my life, I don't want to just be about what I accumulated, what I did for myself, the money I earned. If that's all my life was about, then why was I ever here? Right. And that's what I think about more and more is I do spend a lot of time reflecting. And meditating has been a godsend because it's allowed me to be more present, to be more mindful, to be more appreciative. Man, I have my health. I have no financial concerns. I'm truly blessed. I'm very fortunate to be able to do something that I love, to be able to work with friends, to laugh on a daily basis. So I spent a lot of time. You're spot on, man. The lockdown really kind of forced me to spend more time being reflective, thinking about who I want to be and how I want to grow as a man.
Thank you for that. Actually, it touches on something you've spoken about before, enjoying the process. That's been one of my big things, is to notice the flowers. I'm very much, certainly a year ago, A to B, I'm running late, I've got to get there, I'm thinking about the next job, the next goal, the next objective. Whereas actually, if we're not going to be present, there's a philosopher who said, if you live in the present, then you live forever. Because the idea being that if we're living in the future, we're not living at all. And that really does, it certainly is prescient for me. But when I told people I was going to be interviewing Big E, a lot of people got confused because they thought I was talking about the deceased greatest rapper of all time, Biggie Smalls, right, Christopher Wallace. Right. You're into your music, I know this. Who are your top 5 all-time rappers?
Ooh, all time, man. So I'm usually not a fan of making lists, but I will give you, because it's so fluid for me. It's
I hear
so
that,
fluid.
I hear that, yeah.
I will say, like, Tupac has always kind of been my favorite rapper. He's my number one.
Okay.
I'll say Pac, Nas.
Yes, QB's finest.
You know what? Here's one who doesn't get enough love, but Ghostface Killer. If you look at Ghostface,
Wu-Tang.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. Okay.
Bruh, Ghost is a monster and has been doing it for decades. Look at his solo records. He never fell off, man. Even some of his smaller albums like Apollo Kids, which doesn't get enough love. Okay. Go back and listen to his discography, man. He's got a lot of heat. Bulletproof Wallets, Ghostface is in my top 5. So what I said
3.
Pac, Nas, Ghostface.
2 more.
I got to go big. It feels lazy because everyone says Biggie, but I'll go Biggie.
Okay.
And who do I want to put in my 5th spot? I can't leave out Jay-Z. I gotta put Jay-Z in.
It's got to happen. Do you know what? It is a tough question. I appreciate you giving the list because there are so many, and I was not expecting the Ghostface Killer. But I think Wu-Tang gets slept on, as a group. Yes. People, they were mob, Wu-Tang, we're talking fire, and especially that 90s, for me as well, early noughties era. That is just, I look back at that and go, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how good we had it.
So good, man. And especially, I think a lot of times people think of the Wu-Tang Clan and they think of their records as a group, but also look at the solo records, man. They got so many classics. If you look at Only Built for Cuban Links, Liquid Swords, there's so many individual records that are fire in their catalog. ODB has one of the best records of all time.
Which one?
So it's I'm blanking. You put me on the spot.
You see, for me, one of my favorite bits is his spot with Mariah Carey in New York in the house. That will get a party started no matter where you go.
Yes, it's the Return to the 36 Chambers.
Yes,
it's the one with the driver's license picture on it.
Yeah,
I was just blanking. But yes, that's a classic. Him singing is a beautiful thing. So yes, Wu-Tang Clan and their individual records, their solo records are incredible.
Biggie, this has been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for being so honest. And I look forward to seeing what you do next as the reigning Intercontinental Champion on WWE.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Naked bacon. One day, all bacon will be made this way.